if I put in solar panels, how long will they pay themselves back? And I've heard figures of anything from 6 or 7 years to 11, 12, 13 years.
If you're charging your electric car, you could sell it back to the grid. Like I think in England they're paying 60 cents per unit of electricity that you sell back at those peak times.
Hello, and you're very welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler, in association with Square. Square helps you look after your business needs, from payments and menu management to online ordering. Visit square.com for more. Now, the government has abolished VAT on solar panels for your home, so is now the time to pull the trigger and to go solar, particularly with electricity prices so high. If so, where do you start? How many panels do you need? How much electricity will they actually generate? And what else do you need to know, like planning permission or batteries or grants? Well, joining me to explain this is Brian McIntyre, Programme Manager at the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, known to the rest of us as the SEAI. Brian, let's just talk about the zero VAT for a second. That's 13.5% off the panels and the installation. Is that time limited or is that permanent cut?
As far as I know, it's a permanent cut. It makes sense to kind of reduce the costs, make it easier for people to invest in solar panels and generate more renewable electricity.
Yeah. Do you think that the price of the installation and the panels might rise somewhat to meet that gap? We've already heard from people like UCC's Dr. Paul Dean, who said that according to their research, the price of installing solar went up by 20% last year. And we are in a time of fairly rampant inflation. I mean, it could mean €1,000 maybe off your installation costs, but should I be expecting the prices to rise?
I don't think you should. I think that's something we always get in terms of grants, in terms of what that prices go up to when grants get introduced for things. With something like this, I think people are very conscious of the costs. The costs are high enough already, so I wouldn't expect that the prices will go up on the basis that the VAT has been abolished.
Okay, let's talk about costs then. What can you expect to pay if you want to put in, I say, a standard installation? How many panels are we talking about, and what would it cost?
Okay, so when you're looking at getting it done, I think the first thing you'd look at is getting your bills for the last 12 months to get an idea of how much you use, and again, whether it's day or night usage, if you have like a day-night meter on it, because that's ultimately what will guide the installers in prescribing something for your house. So when they come to your house, they look at the system, look at your bills, and they can generate a model for that location, that orientation of house, how much electricity is going to be generated, say January, February, March, for a monthly figure across the year. So you can see how it tallies with your bills usage. So we would have always said that somewhere around 2.5 kilowatts, so which would be about 6 panels, would be about a standard to cover what you use in your house.
6 panels?
About 6 panels, yeah.
And how much electricity is that going to cover for you?
That would cover around about 2,000 kilowatt hours per year, which is... ESB would say that the typical house would use 4,200 kilowatt hours per year of electricity, so about 50% of that.
50%?
Yeah. For
6 panels. And how much would those 6 panels cost roughly?
So it can vary. I would always say to get 3 quotes. Ballpark would be about €6,000. Now that was before the VAT got reduced or got put back to zero. So there might be variation. It could be 5.5, could be 6.5, but about 6,000 would be fairly standard for a 6 kilowatt or 2 kilowatt installation or 2.5 kilowatt installation.
And when we talk about the average home in this context, it's difficult to imagine an average home. Are we talking about a semi-D house with it's small family or something?
Like you said, it's very difficult to what the typical house would, but usually like a 3-bedroom semi-D would be considered very typical.
With a family?
3 people I think would have
3
considered.
people.
Yeah, so it's based on like the average consumption.
And that's fine, we can deal with the average.
Yeah.
So for an average house, semi-D, 3 people in it, 6 panels might do 40 to 50% of your electricity for the year.
Of the order.
Measured over the year.
Measured over the year,
and we'll get to the seasonal difference now in a minute. If you had a bigger family than that, or your electricity needs for whatever reason were higher, if you wanted to, instead of having 6 panels, you wanted to have maybe 12 panels, does it just go without saying that you double the price, or how does that work?
No, like a lot of the costs are a big portion costs are labour. It's not a linear increase based on the size of the installation. So what we've seen would be more like a typical installation might be about 3.2 kilowatts, which would be about 8 panels now, because more people are working from home. They might have more usage at home, like you said. The people just tend to use more electricity. So that would be somewhere around 7,500-8,000 euros for say a 3.2 kilowatt, which
That's
would be
from
about
6
8
to
panels.
8.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go even higher, a neighbour of mine, for example, in my estate, he put in 14 panels.
Yeah.
2 years ago. Supposing instead of 6 you wanted to go to 12.
Yeah.
Is it twice the price? Or is it more than twice the price?
It would to go to 12. I would say it would be about 10,500.
So not as much as twice the price.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Because, like I said, a lot of the costs are setting up and putting the infrastructure in place to put the modules onto it. It's not just a kind of a linear increase. Now, just in the context of those prices, they're including the VAT that's now been reduced or has been abolished, and it also doesn't take into account the grants. So if we go back,
I wanted to ask you exactly. You were reading my mind on the grant. Let's go back to the 6 panels, the standard installation. How much are you going to get in a grant there?
So if we take that as a 6,000 euro cost, you're probably the reduction VAT is going to knock about 750 euros off it. For a 2 kilowatt installation, that's going to be another 1,800 euros of a grant off it. So you're looking at the ballpark of that 6,000 installation could cost you a net amount of about 3,500 euros.
So you're getting over $2,000 of a grant for that.
The grant is 1,800 euros. Yeah. The VAT then would be about 700, 750 euros.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're combining the two there. Okay. So in terms of how long it takes to pay off, sometimes you hear that used as a metric. If I put in solar panels, how long will they pay themselves back? Yeah. And I've heard figures of anything from, 6 or 7 years to 11, 12, 13 years, maybe depending on the electricity prices.
Yeah, and as well, the electricity prices, and as well how much of the electricity has been generated that you can use at that time, because it's very much time dependent. So if you're working from home and you can use a lot of your electricity, and that's where the apps that you get would come in really handy, because you actually see in real time how much you're generating. So if you see a big spike during the day, say, right, now's the time to put on a wash, or put on the oven or say cook lunch earlier in the day, or just if you can modify your behavior. I think people generally tend to anecdotally modify their behavior to take advantage of when you got a peak in generation from the roof. So you can actually save yourself more money or increase how much free electricity essentially that you're getting.
Do you need to, is this really optimized for people who have houses or dwellings that are south facing?
With side facing is always the ideal orientation. If you switch it 90 degrees where it's east-west, you're probably dropping maybe 15-20% of what you could get.
Okay, so my house, for example, has east-west roof.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean, in plain English, that I need 20% more solar panels to match the house across the road from me that has a south-facing roof?
It would be about that. The orientation, how much actually the direct sunlight and how much diffuse light you'll get. So the orientation does matter. So it would be like 15-20% less.
So my cost then is 20% higher, but the grant remains the same. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is a south-facing angled roof better than a flat roof?
Not necessarily. If you've got a flat roof, you can put it on a frame, because ultimately
you can angle it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You want to have a tilt on it because, again, you want rainwater to run off it, and essentially allow it to clean itself. But you generally on a flat roof, you'd put it on a frame that kind of angles it at maybe 30 degrees.
Planning permission, that was an issue. Is it still an issue?
No, the planning permission was removed last year. So it had been that it was either 12 metres squared or 50% of your roof area, whichever was less. But that's been removed since last year.
So that means you can put panels on every part of your roof?
Exactly.
And as many panels as you want?
Well, you can cover your entire roof, yeah.
You can cover your entire roof.
In real terms. In practical terms, you might not necessarily, because if you're in windier areas, there's going to be increased wind load on your roof, so you want to keep it back from the edges a bit more. So it reduces the area to play with in windier areas.
And does that include, for example, street-facing roofs in towns and cities? If I own a townhouse in a city street, I can cover my street-facing roof with solar panels.
Yeah, the exemption was for all rooftops, yeah.
And was there ever an exception there for sensitive areas around facilities like airports. I had read at one point that there was an issue potentially with the glare from solar panels for planes.
It's something that has been raised by the DA, for example, that they have glare. I'm not sure where that stands. It's something that's in consultation around, like the mass rollout of solar PV, especially near the airport. I believe there's a solar farm out near the airport, so I'm not sure how much of an issue it actually would be. It's something that there are ongoing talks with the DA about that.
And is it roof only, or can you put your solar panel, if for example, in your back garden, leaning against a wall?
Yeah, you can have a ground-mounted system. The planning permission requirement there was less than 25 square meters, but that's still a lot of solar panels to get on.
So, could I make a little mini solar farm if I had a large back garden?
In theory, yeah, you could.
Okay, that's kind of interesting. And I'm going to ask you in a minute about selling electricity back to the grid. But I'm conscious that a lot of our listeners and viewers will have an apartment.
Yeah.
Is there any solution for an apartment?
Apartments are really tricky because, again, it's got through the managing company, and it's something that's
You mean in terms of what they allow?
What they allow, yeah.
So, but other than what the local block policy might be, from a broader legal or regulatory perspective, there's nothing maybe to stop. If I have a large apartment with a wraparound balcony, I could put solar panels there according to those rules. If
it's allowed for within that particular building, it might be trickier in terms of actually setting it up and putting panels on. But if it was allowed within that building management.
Have you heard of any group schemes? Like, I'm conscious that I live in an estate, and for Sky, for example, we're not allowed to put small satellite dishes up. So what they do is they've one satellite dish, and it's a group scheme. It feeds into all of the house if we want that. Now, Sky have moved on with their technology, but that was the system. Is there anything similar like that could be done for apartment blocks? Maybe you could have a bank of, 30 or 40 or 50 if it's a large block on the roof.
It's definitely doable. I know there's apartment or building developments that would have like group heating systems where they'd all have a centralised heating system. So it's definitely feasible.
Yeah. Just in terms of the difference in the seasons and the light, we all know that solar needs light to generate power. That's optimized when the sun is out. It's optimized when the sun is out most. So that's the summertime, late spring. Actually, from about now, actually, it's pretty good. What's the drop off in solar power if it's cloudy or if it's raining, for example?
If you have a really overcast day, you might get, say, from a 1 kilowatt installation, you might get about 100 watts, so about 10% of what your maximum achievable output is. So it's
almost nothing really. If it's a very heavy cloudy day, it's a dark day, it's raining, you're going to get next to nothing.
You'll get a small amount. Like, it's not a huge amount, but like the modelling that would typically be done for houses that are looking at putting in an installation would be based on taking all those kind of factors into account, the local meteorological conditions and the level of overcast days we have in Ireland. So it's based more on reality. They're pretty accurate, the models that they use. There is a drop off, but you're still generating electricity. So January and December would be the 2 months.
Yeah. So if I want to budget for how much I'm going to need to pay my electricity bills in the winter time, I know that if I get a sunny day on June the 21st and I have a south-facing or even east-west facing panels, happy days. I'm not going to need to pay much through my traditional electricity provider. But say December the 21st, shortest day of the year, even if it's a sunny day, what's the drop-off? What's the difference between a sunny day on December the 21st and June the 21st? Like, would I get less than half of the power from that?
Probably less than half, yeah. I was looking at a friend of mine had actually looked at getting some solar panels into the house, and they gave me the modelling that they had got for it. So if it took January and December, which would be the two worst months, in theory they could be getting around 80 to 100 euros worth of electricity during those 2 months. If you look at, I think it was May and June, or June and July were the two highest months, you're probably looking somewhere north of 350, 370 euros for that particular house, which is about, I think, 3 kilowatts.
How does selling electricity now work to the grid? We've heard a lot about this.
Yeah, that microgeneration support scheme was launched back last year with the idea that if you had excess electricity, it was all just spilled back onto the grid and it was wasted, so you got no benefit from it. So the idea was that people would be paid for the excess to send back to the grid. So if you have a smart meter, it measures the exact amount of electricity spilled back to the grid, and you get paid what's called a clean export guarantee by your supplier. So that's of the order of, I looked at some of them, there's a bit of variation, but it's around 18-20 cents per unit of electricity that you send back to the grid.
Okay,
You're
so
getting paid.
a couple of questions around that. Does that happen automatically, or do you have to apply? Do you have to arrange for that?
You'd have to arrange for it. You discuss it with your supplier when you're getting set up with your solar PV system.
And will all of them fairly automatically agree to it?
Yeah, there shouldn't be any issues really with getting that set up.
And is it capped at a certain amount? Let's say, for example, you've barely been there during the summer. You took a month's holidays. Your solar panels are still going good-o on your house. You're consuming almost nothing in your house. You're generating actually relatively quite a lot. Does that mean that every bit of electricity you're generating you'll get paid for?
Yeah, for the most part. There is a cap at the very high end where we're getting talk about like 4, 5, 6 kilowatts or 5 or 6 kilowatts. I'm not entirely sure on the number, but for a typical house,
I'm just wondering roughly, because I remember when this was launched, I think the suggestion was at the time that even if you weren't in the house at all and you had loads of solar panels, that it would kind of be capped at a couple of €100 per year or something like that per year.
Yeah.
That the amounts that you could actually sell back were actually very small, relative to what a normal bill is. So does that sound right?
I think it'd be a lot more, like, I don't think it's that cutting into your low. For the typical house, it's not going to be an issue, even if you are away for those summer months.
I'm just wondering whether or not this is really just a couple of euro, a month, or whether it could be, if you got sun the whole time and you have a big family, but they were all away, you were there by yourself, you weren't using electricity, could you make, €500 in a month,
In theory, like the cap isn't good. Like realistically, for most people, it's not going to impact on what they're getting back from it.
Okay. What about if I want to add more panels? Let's say I put in 6 panels, and that's fine for a while, but then we've new arrivals in the family, or I like the technology and I want to use more, but I wait, say, another year or two. Generally speaking, is it easy to add piecemeal to my 6 panels? Can I just add another 6 panels? Or, I mean, is there some technology reason why I couldn't do that?
No, technically it should be fine to do it. There's going to be an additional cost to put them up, but I mean, it's not, technically it's absolutely feasible to do that.
And what about advances in the technology? Because obviously solar technology does advance from decade to decade, maybe from year to year. Is the technology now, the panels I buy now, are they much better than they would have been, say, 8 or 9 years ago?
You probably get more from each panel now. So the panels, I've seen panels out are 410 watts or 0.4 kilowatts per panel. They might have been 0.3 kilowatts 8-10 years ago. So they have the efficiency, or how much you're getting from a panel, has grown. The real advances coming down the line will be trying to replace, say, the silicon on the panel to make it a much more lightweight, a higher efficiency panel, and that would really open up the door to putting it on more places. So you don't have this big heavy structure on your roof, that it would allow them to put up in more places, and a lighter structure, and that's where the real advances are coming in terms of the actual material use. In terms of the homeowner and the changes in technology, a lot more systems now come with an app, like I said earlier on, that you can actually see in real time how much you're generating, and the better ones would show you what you're using, so you can actually balance that out and try and say add to what you're using to kind of to make more and capitalize more on what you're generating in the house.
And do the panels, do they degrade over time?
Like, generally speaking, the lifespan of them, like a good panel will be 20, 25, 30 years, I've heard in some cases.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very low maintenance. There's, like I said, they're on a slope. Water runs off them, unless you've got leaves falling on them or a bit of debris coming down for some reason. You might need to clean that off, but they don't.
Birds, seagulls,
yeah,
seagull poo.
It might be, yeah. If they're starting to build up on it, it would be worth considering just cleaning it off. But
a lot of seagulls around my estate.
Yeah, if they're very productive, that might be an issue to clean them off. But it's like the upgrade isn't.
So typically, could you expect in an estate like mine to have them wiped once or twice a year, or is that how it's done? Or do you need a specialist to do that?
No, just someone competent who go up in roofs that's not going to break them. I mean, they're fairly robust pieces of kit. You just need to wash them off.
Speaking of competencies, I think there are over 200 approved installers, according to the SEAI, their lists. Does that mean that you have to use one of those installers? If someone you know down the road is handy and is decided to start his own business putting up solar panels, even though he's not on the approved list, is there any reason he can't do that or she can't do that? Should I avoid them?
Not necessarily. They could be perfectly competent and not be a registered contractor. But I suppose the benefit of having a registered contractor is that we have a register, so there tend to be more. You tend to get less issues around the competency side of things and compliance with certain like it's not rocket science to put up solar panels, but there's a lot of basic things that you can actually get wrong. And with any of the grant schemes, they have detailed guidance on what you should do when you're installing a roof and what you shouldn't do, essentially.
Yeah.
So you're getting a good quality installation when you actually go through a registered contractor. You just have that bit of comeback on it as well. So they might be perfectly fine. It's not to say that they're not. Anyone that's not registered is incompetent or not suitable to do the job, but it's just we have to have certain controls in terms of what their ability that they've done, what they've passed, and the requirements that we have in place for them when they're actually installing
now,
PV panels.
If I have oil or gas or electricity, is it just normal if I put in solar panels that they will work fairly seamlessly with the system I have at the moment for electricity and or heat?
Yeah, I mean, you're just feeding electricity in through your meter box to come into the house. So that's you can set up to prioritize what's coming in from the roof, and as well.
Like, do I have to replace any of my current equipment or system?
You're just adding to it. No, you're just adding. So the panels will come down through. So you get a current coming down through, and the inverter in the house is just a box within. It's usually in the roof space. We'll convert it into the type of electricity that you use in the house. So switching from AC to DC. So it's just sending that into the house in a format that you can use. What I should have added earlier is that you can actually get hot water from it as well. So you can install a thing called a diverter that if you have an excess that you're not using in the house, so you're not there during the day or you're out or whatever reason, you have an excess, it'll send it into the hot water cylinder and heat your hot water for you as well. So it's a way of storing it. It's sort of like a battery.
And if I have a heat pump, does that mean that it's just all additive, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to run your heat pump as such. You're always using electricity, and the PV panel is going to feed electricity into the house. So there's always going to be a baseline of usage there. And sometimes, say, if your heat pump is running at lower temperature during the day, if you're not there, and then has to bring it back up to, say, 19, 20 degrees, it's not going to have enough to power the heat pump jumping back up. But you're constantly generating electricity from the sun to feed into and offset against what you're actually drawing from the grid.
Now, batteries is something that people talk about as well, because obviously the idea with solar is the sun shines and gives you electricity there and then. There's no sunshine at nighttime. You can't get power from solar at night, and that's why people buy batteries. Yeah. So there's quite a few questions around this. Is it a good idea to buy a battery for your solar system?
I've heard people say that the financials don't stack up. I think it very much depends on your circumstances.
When they say that now, what are the costs we're talking about here?
A battery could cost between $2,500 and $3,500, depending on the size. So the size of your battery will depend on the size of the amount of panels you have on your roof. So
and how much electricity or energy can that store?
Again, it depends on the size of the panel, the size of the battery you're getting. So it might be.
So the one that you quoted there, between €2,500 and €3,000, how much energy can that store?
You could be looking at maybe 2.5, 3 kilowatts of
and how much?
storage.
What can that do? 2.5, 3 kilowatts.
Well, again, it's feeding it back into it, so you might not be using that at the time. So you're storing that battery. So during the day. So for a perfect example is people are out working during the day. They can't make use of. There's a small amount of background electricity being used at the time, but they're coming home at 5 o'clock, and a lot of the generation has happened already, and they want to turn on the cooker, maybe put on a wash or whatever. That would be when it makes sense to use a battery. When you're going to use that daytime electricity, it's at a higher rate, but use it later in the evening when the generation is low.
Will a battery that's, say, 2.5, 3 kilowatts, will that be filled to that from 0 to 3 kilowatts in one day of sunshine?
It should be on a sunnier day.
And if I go home and then I'm there with my family and I use the cooker, the washing machine, television, kettle, and the other stuff, will that use more than 3 kilowatts?
It might do, depending how long you have the cooker on and how long a wash you have on. But it should be able to cover a lot of that, the majority of that.
Okay. Can you use your electric car as a battery?
You can. Actually, it's becoming a more widely used. In England, they had a trial where they were paying people that had electric cars that were charging during the day to send the electricity back from the car battery back onto the grid, so it reduces the peak demand, say, later in the evening. So
how does that work? How do you do it? I have an electric car. How do I do it?
It's a special type of box that allows it. It has to be set up to allow this kind of called vehicle to grid. So basically, down the line, so as we are now, we're basically consumers of electricity. So the feed-in tariff has allowed us, or the microgeneration scheme has allowed us to kind of become more of what's called prosumers, so we can producers and consumers. And then if you think fast forward where we're electrifying pretty much everything, if you're charging an electric car, you can sell it back to the grid. Like I think in England they're paying 60 cents per unit of electricity that you sell back at those peak times.
But if there's a port in my car that I use to stick the charger in to charge the car from my house. I've a charging box. How do I use that as a battery to power the cooker and the washing machine and the TV at night?
That would be like, I'm not sure it's not really set up at the minute for that kind of setup, but it will be, like, that's becoming more prevalent, where you will have, I mean, that's the view of down the line, maybe 10 years time, where we'd have a setup that your car is connected to the house. Yeah. So you can charge the car during the day and then draw back from the car at night time.
Mm-hmm. How popular are solar panels at the moment? I saw a figure recently, I think it was Eamon Ryan had mentioned that he thought there were 50,000 homes in Ireland that had solar panels. Is that about right? It
sounds about right. Yeah. Like, it's the numbers have taken off in the last couple of years. Like, I was looking at my own bills again this morning, looked at June 21. It was about 16.6 cents per unit of electricity, and now it's 42.4. So even last October it went up from, I think, about 32 cents to 42.
How many panels do you have?
I don't have any panels.
Oh, sorry, you don't have any panels, yeah. But just in terms of the state itself, one thing we often hear in the debate about electric cars is it's often thrown back at the government. Well, there's hardly any electric cars in use in the state fleet. Now, I think they are getting a few more there, and I've seen a few Garda cars, actually, that are electric cars. What about solar panels used by the government itself? I've no idea how many or how few they use. Do they use many solar panels?
Yeah, it's becoming much more widely used now, especially it makes, like I said, with the cost of electricity. There was an announcement a few months back about putting solar panels across all schools, which makes sense, not just in terms of for the schools themselves, but as basically generators of renewable electricity.
What about your own building?
It was
SCAI?
Yeah, we're tenants in the building, but it was one of the requirements we said when the building was being built to have renewable energy on the roof.
Yeah, okay. Just in terms of the technology itself, is it advancing? Like, is there a reason for me to wait another year or 2 years for there might be some breakthrough coming down the road?
I wouldn't have thought so in that time frame. I don't think anything's going to change hugely in the short term. Like, there's a lot of the progress I hear about changes in materials and it's still very much at the early stages in research. So I don't think that anything's going to change if you're putting off for maybe 2-3 years on the basis that they'd completely or fundamentally change what's going to be done. I don't think that's going to happen in that time frame. So I certainly don't think people should be waiting for that kind of change.
Is demand out the door at the moment? If I wanted to go and buy solar panels now, is it like electric cars? I might have to wait a couple of months.
There is a huge demand. I think people are just scaling up to try and meet the demand, because it's not something that's going to change anytime soon, especially with the announcement of the abolishing the VAT. That's just going to see things increase, and everyone knows, because that's coming to play, then contractors are able to scale up and bring more people onto the work.
And is there any quality level or ISO or anything like that I need to look out for with the solar panels if I decide to go with the guy down the street as opposed to an SCAI approved vendor? Are there dodgy panels?
There are, I suppose. You generally don't see them on the schemes. Like, a lot of CE marked panels, which would be typical of any product in Europe, would meet a certain quality requirement. There are dodgy panels that you won't get too long out of, shipped from far-flung places. But I think
you have to do a little bit of due diligence yourself
exactly,
on it. Okay, Brian McIntyre, Programme Manager at the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. Thank you very much for coming in and explaining all that to us. Thanks also to Tabitha Monaghan, who produced, to Gav Hennessy on sound, and to Conan Doherty on video. I'm Adrian Weckler. You've been listening to The Big Tech Show, or watching it even, in association with Square, and we'll talk to you same time next week. Bye-bye.